It's time to talk. Let's get talking. Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. This is your boy, Carl E. Long, here with episode 57 of the podcast. Episode 57 of the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you are here. Yes, so glad that you're here. So today's episode, guys, is something very, very close to my heart and something that I wanted to talk about a lot. And this is the title of the podcast for today. Today's podcast title is From Redlining to Woke, the Real Story They Don't Tell. That is our subject for today. From redlining to woke, the real story they don't tell. Yeah, that's it right there. So, let's talk about something really real today. Today, title of my podcast, From Redlining to Woke, the Real Story They Don't Tell. What started this podcast, I came across a video from a content creator that really stopped me in my tracks. Not because it was shocking, but because it was honest, and it walked through a long history of what Black Americans have faced in this country, and more importantly, how those struggles didn't just disappear, they evolved. Yeah. We're talking about systems, we're talking about policies, we're talking about decisions that just didn't affect one generation, but shaped the reality we're still living in today. So in this episode, I want to take a deeper dive. I want to unpack every layer of that conversation. And this is all kind of stemming from the phrase also of, I see a lot of these Republicans, and it's supposed to be so cute that you can say it's woke. Oh, we're not going to be woke. Like woke is something horrible. And I just don't like the way that they just do that as if it's a bad word. And Democrats just kind of fall to it and afraid of the word woke. So, I just want to unpack every layer of that conversation from this video, from racial segregation to redlining to education disparities to the destruction of communities and towns. This is not just history, this is context. And if we're going to have real conversations about where we are today, we have to understand how we got here. We have to understand how we got here. So we're going to get into it. When we talk about racial inequality in America, we can't just start in the present. We have to go back to a time when segregation wasn't just a social form. It was the law. Do y'all hear me? It was the law. Those things didn't happen to us because we let them happen to us. It was the law. Do we get that? Number one, do we get that? All you people that bring up this woke stuff, the law. This is what we've had to deal with a lot, is the law. So, separate schools, separate neighborhoods, separate opportunities. This is what we're talking about. The law. We had separate schools not because we wanted to go to separate schools. We don't have black colleges because we wanted to have black colleges. We had nowhere else to go. It was the law. Separate but equal. Do y'all remember all that? Do you remember all that? Straighten my camera just a little bit. Here we go. Yeah. Do you remember all that? Separate neighborhoods, separate opportunities, and even after the laws changed, the systems, they didn't disappear. They just adapted. Let's take redlining, for example. Banks and federal housing policies literally drew lines around black neighborhoods, labeling them as high risk. That meant black families were denied home loans, denied investments, and denied the single greatest wealth building tool in America, home ownership. Denied. It wasn't by choice. Denied. We couldn't get houses. I mean, we could get houses, the ones that you guys wanted us to have, but the ones we wanted to have, there was redlining, and it was huge, and it happened to us a lot. Denied the single greatest wealth building tool in America is home ownership, property. That's where the money comes from. That's why so many white families can pass down things from generation to generation because they have all this stuff. We don't have this, too. So, meanwhile, other communities were given access, stability, and growth. That gap, it didn't just affect individuals, it created generational consequences. And then there's education. Schools still largely were funded by property taxes, which means communities that were historically denied wealth are often left with underfunded schools, few resources, overcrowded classrooms, limited opportunities. So when people ask, why are the outcomes different? We have to ask, were the starting points ever equal? Were they ever equal? I get so many of the little bloggers and Republicans and MAGA people saying, you guys we take advantage of the system. We don't want to work. We want to do that. But history does not show that. History shows our people to be very hardworking people that wanted their own stuff. We wanted our own stuff, and we didn't want nobody to do it for us. But whenever we tried to get our own stuff, somebody always came along and tried to destroy it. Why was that? That's the question. I'm asking the question. Why was that? So now y'all want to railroad us into thinking that, hey, everything is equal now. You don't need to get anything, all of this stuff that y'all are doing, all of this Medicaid and whatever else you need and trying to get reparations and all kinds of things. We're just talking out of our behinds and just being lazy black people. And that's not the story. That's not the experience. And it is not the truth. It is not the truth. We are trying so hard to become our own people and to progress in this country. And we don't want we don't want the welfare. We don't want that. But when we're not given the equal chance to do what a lot of other Americans do, then we have to speak up because we need the help. If it wasn't for the government intervening and making laws and things, we wouldn't be where we are right now. I often say this in a lot of my podcasts. I'll mention the fact that when LBJ signed that civil rights bill, do you think that all those people that were against it just went away? It barely passed. It barely passed. You got to go back and look at the votes. Do you think he had to go and recruit people to get that thing signed? You think those people just went away? Do you think that the people that they were trying to convince that we would just, didn't want this thing to happen just went away? No, I say this all the time. No, these people were still in office. They were still running banks and buildings and businesses. They had children. They had wives. And all of this hate was still around, still being spewed. So it never went away. The law just said you can't do it anymore. But that just protected us to do some things. But it didn't help us all the way. But thank God it wasn't the law anymore that you could do this. So, limited opportunities. So people usually ask, why are the outcomes different? We have to ask, were the starting points ever equal? I'm going to say that again. And were the starting points ever equal in education, in home? They never were. They never were. And let's not ignore what happened to thriving black communities. I tell you that we are a people that want to do our own thing, happen thriving black communities. And the first thing comes up is the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, a symbol of black success, entrepreneurship, and independence, destroyed. Not by accident, but by violence. It wasn't the only one. Across the country, black neighborhoods was displaced through highways, urban renewal projects, and economic neglect. And a lot of you may know this, and a lot of you may not. And I'm speaking specifically to my Anglo-American brothers and sisters. Do you know this? Do you know that that's what happened to a lot of the cities that we built on our own? You didn't want us to be around you, so we started our own communities, our own neighborhoods, and we were trying to do our own thing. But because we were progressing and getting our cities and things together, I don't know, was it jealousy? What was it? Was it that we didn't earn it? Did we not? Was it not due to us? We were been in this country just as long as you have, and it's built as just as much as you have. And I think that we deserve the right to live in peace. We never provoked anybody. All we wanted to do was to live. So these neighborhoods were destroyed. And the first time they wanted to do something, let's just take it to the black neighborhood. They're uppity right now. They think they're all that. Let's just get rid of it. You know, that person existed. Yes. And that person had power. That person had money. And that person got things done. Yeah. So when we talk about economic disparities today, we're not talking about random outcomes. We're looking at the ripple effects of deliberate decisions. Now let's just pause for 1 second and talk about something tied directly to this conversation, and that's that word woke. Many people use that word. It just runs something straight through me every time I hear it. Like Pete Hegseth right now, he thinks the military, anybody that's black or a woman or in power, they were put there because of a woke agenda. Let's just talk about the word woke. Because many people today, it's been turned into a joke, a label, and sometimes even an insult. If someone is being deemed, especially a Republican, if you're being called woke, that's a bad word. I'm not being woke. I'm not being woke. And I don't know how this even started, but that word has roots. It came out of the black community. It meant being aware, being conscious, staying alert to injustice, especially racial injustice. I'm woke. I'm always going to be woke. It was about understanding everything we're talking about right now. Being woke. Know the true story. Know the history. And know when they're trying to put one over on you. Be woke. Wake up. Don't let this happen to you. Know the truth. Know when there's not being sincere. Know that when they're doing something to put you back again, because that stuff is still here. You got to be woke. You got to be aware. We're still fighting the same things we fought for many, many years. So when woke is used to dismiss these conversations, to downplay history, or to act like issues don't matter, it hits different. I know it does for me, because what's really being dismissed is lived experience. It's the history of segregation. It's the impact of redlining. It's the reality of education gaps and economic barriers. Being woke was never about being extreme. It was about saying, I see what's happening and I'm paying attention. So when that word gets flipped into something negative, it doesn't just change the meaning. It undermines the message. And that's why for many of us, there's frustration here. I'm one of the most frustrated people in the world when I hear somebody use that word and make fun of it. Yes, I'm woke. W-O-K-E. I am woke to anything that I can see where that's happening again. Because unless we have to stomp out our own disparity that's happening to our people. But what gives it more power is when you do it, my white brothers and sisters, when you see something that is totally wrong and you see it, stomp it out. Tell your people that's not right. We're asking for simple stuff here. Help us. If you don't want us to feel like, you don't want us to be taking advantage, as you say, then help us get out of what you put us in the first place. We need your help. But you know what? We're getting really tired of sitting back waiting for you to do things. So we're making our own way. We're making our own way. And we're starting to not give a damn about anything. It's a bad place to be in, but that's where you're sending a lot of people. These elections and things are making people so angry, so discouraged that we don't even want to do anything anymore. What's the point? What's the point? If you know anything about black people, we're going to always be on the side of righteousness. We are. And we're going to find that candidate that is as well. Right versus wrong. We're going to be on the side of right. And that's the reason why the Democratic Party became the party that it is, because it used to not be the party of black people. Black people were mostly Republicans. But when Republicans started to show that they were not attuned to civil rights and things started, we left. And then Franklin Delano Roosevelt came, the New Deal, and John F. Kennedy came. That's who we attached to. So we go where our civil rights are not violated. Nick Cannon, read your history. Well, that's a little jab at him for something he put out on social media about the Democrats being the party of the Ku Klux Klan. They were. That's the definitive word. But things have changed. They're not anymore. So, Nick, that's a whole nother podcast there. So, when they flip that word into something negative, it just doesn't change the meaning. It undermines the message. And that's why I get frustrated. Because awareness should never be something to mock. Awareness is where change begins. And that's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Because it challenges the idea that everyone is starting from the same place. It challenges the idea that hard work alone explains everything. History didn't just happen. It was structured. And the results of that structure are still with us. It's still with us. I know y'all don't want to believe that. I know y'all think that y'all are stuck here. Y'all always yelling about your civil rights, but we don't. We do it because it's still there. We're woke. We still see it. I mean, look at what happened with the government shutdown, the government cuts. That affected black women more than anybody. Why? Black women are the most educated people of all of they are. And they deserved a lot of those jobs they had, but they were put out of these jobs because of wokeness and this Trump administration. And that is not right. So I'm woke about that. And it's got our black women just really discouraged. And I'm really sad and upset that happened. Yeah. This stuff is still with us, guys. Still with us. One of these days, I'm going to have someone on this podcast who is totally opposite of what I believe in and see if I can handle or how I would handle myself in a direct conversation to see if I can reach the people and make them understand what we are. We're not asking for no handout. We're asking for help from you. Stomp this crap out. Stop it. We're sick of this already. I'm sick of talking about racial issues. I'm sick of it. We're tired of it. We want this to change. Yeah. So you see how passionate I am about this. So why is this so personal to me? Because I didn't just read about it or just hear about it. I lived it. I'm old enough to know. My family lived it. In the past episode, I talked about what it meant to grow up in Black America. You can check that podcast out. And how these experiences shaped who I am today. But this right here, this goes even deeper. I was a kid, let me just tell you this. I was a kid who loved television. I mean, back then, TV didn't look like me. I used to watch TV so much, I still do. And almost everybody on screen was white. This is from a child's perspective, so stay with me. Back then, TV didn't look like me. Almost everybody on screen was white. And when a black person did show up on, that was a moment, a big moment. I remember Oprah saying when she first saw the Supreme, she was like calling everybody, black people on TV, black people on TV. It was like that for us. When the Jackson 5 showed up, oh my God, that was huge. Ike and Tina Turner showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show. That was huge. Y'all don't realize how huge that was for us because we didn't see us. When they added one black person to a soap opera, huge. We started watching. God, and when Good Times, all these other shows, huge. We didn't have shows. So we would gather around the TV, proud, excited, just to see someone who looked like us. This is truth. This is me talking. Because we didn't have that representation, not in media, not in many places at all. Then came 1971. 1971, I can remember it almost like it was yesterday. I was about to enter the seventh grade. I had just did sixth grade. My classes from first through sixth grade was mostly with African American students. The neighborhood that I was in used to be a all white neighborhood, and this neighborhood now was upper middle class and middle class blacks who were mainly like supervisors and teachers and professors, and some worked at the airport and post office, and they had what I call moving on up, right? And we had moved to this neighborhood in Dallas, where I'm from. So the schools were pretty much all black. Now, there were a few white families that still were around, but not many. They had all moved. We call that white flight, all right? So we were about to end the seventh grade. So there was a lot of talk in the news, which I can't remember any of because I didn't watch the news back then. But when a federal judge, I remember this name though, Barefoot Sanders, some of you might remember him, ordered forced school desegregation in Dallas. I don't know if there was a suit. I don't know how it all started. I got to look it up. Ordered forced school desegregation in Dallas. That meant one thing. We were no longer going to our neighborhood schools. We were being bused to schools with white students. I can remember my mom and dad talking about it, and they're trying to figure out what schools we're going to go to. We were looking up schools and all kinds of stuff and trying to figure out where they are and where they're going to be taken, because we didn't go to those neighborhoods. We didn't know these white neighborhoods. We were pretty much in our own. So they had to figure out what schools we were going to. And what made it even different, our schools were not, the school that I was going to go to wasn't quite ready yet. So they had to spread us all around. We were in a brand new school. They built a new junior high school, so we were all spread around different places, still at white neighborhood stuff. So now I didn't fully understand what was happening with the judge's ruling, but I was excited. This is the truth. Because in my mind, these were the same kind of people I saw on TV. Nice people, friendly people. I wanted to meet them. I wanted to make friends. And you know what? I did. For me, in many ways, it was an amazing experience. And while I was excited, many of their parents, I'm talking about the white kids, were not, and many of them were not. A lot of them moved away when they heard that desegregation was happening to their neighborhoods. And we weren't living in those neighborhoods quite yet. The neighborhoods where the schools were pretty much still predominantly white. There were a few spray of black people in the neighborhood, some lawyers, some doctors in the white neighborhood that we were being bused to. But we were going to go to school in that neighborhood. So a lot of them started moving to the suburbs, which are like around Dallas, would be Duncanville, DeSoto, and cities like that. And those cities have changed now because those are black cities. Those are black upper middle class cities right now. And others stayed. But but even today, I still wonder how many of them truly didn't want us there. Because I will never forget that first day of school. Yeah, when our new school, we were on the bus. And back then, Dallas was using city buses before they could get enough school buses. We were riding. So we were excited about the bus ride all together. And so here we are pulling up to school, and all of a sudden, rocks hitting the bus. Kids throwing rocks at us. Just like that, my excitement turned into confusion. I remember thinking, why are they doing this? What do we do? And I had seen a little bit about what could possibly happen, because I remember watching the news when Boston had forced desegregation. There was riots in the Boston City School District. They didn't want it. And I was kind of thinking about that. Is this what's happening here in Dallas? I just didn't think that was going to happen here. I said, Boston's way up there. It's not going to happen here in little Dallas, Texas. Dallas is hardly little. But that I remember thinking, why are they doing this? What did we do in the 7th grade, right? 6th grade was a little bit calmer because we kind of snuck in and things would happen. But when we all started to get together as a school, we were all separated. Remember I told you, at different places. The eighth graders were here, the seventh graders were here, and the ninth graders were somewhere else, but we weren't there as a school. So when we finally made it to the school, that I remember thinking, why are they doing this to us and what did we do? And that moment is kind of burned into my memory. It really is. I remember it. I can still see it today. I can still see the one kid with the long hair throwing hurling a rock right at my window. I remember that. And it wasn't the first time I felt that, because that was when the other time was when we had just moved into white neighborhood, but I was much younger. So here's the story. My baby brother and I were sitting in the car, and this is in the neighborhood in Dallas we had just moved to. I'll give the name of the neighborhood. It was Singing Hills, Dallas, Texas, which was a huge area of Oak Cliff that was mostly nice white homes and white neighbors. They lived at Oak Cliff, and it was a nice area. And a lot of the richer people had started moving to Oak Cliff, so that's where we were moving to. So my baby brother and I were sitting in the car while my mother was grocery shopping. Yeah, she was grocery shopping. And a car drove by. He was kind of speeding. I can see the car. I can see the guy in the car. I can kind of remember his face. There was white guys inside. It was probably about 3, maybe 4. And my little brother Kenny, he was in the window. We had the windows down. We were kind of outside of the car playing, because you know how they have the little horses that you can ride. You put a quarter in. We were just kind of hanging out around the car. We weren't locked in the car or anything like that. And while mother was in there shopping, and we were hanging around the horses, and Kenny had gotten back in the car, my little brother, and I can see him now. He had his head out of the window, and he was bending back. You know how we do as kids, and singing a song or something. I can hear him saying something or whatever. Then all of a sudden, these guys spat at us. The spit hit my brother Ken in the face, and he just wiped his head. Oh my God, he wiped it off. And I'm sitting there looking like, what did they do that for? And then they yelled something even worse. They yelled the N word, but they had the word effing in front of it. Effing N word. Yeah. So let that sit in. Okay. I didn't understand. I had to ask my mother, what does that mean? And I remember how quickly she rushed us home from that store when we told her. And we were like, that was when I first moved into the neighborhood. I was like 5. I was going to be going to the 2nd grade, I think, or it's 3rd grade. And Kenny was still, I don't think he was even ready to go to school yet. He might have been in the 1st grade. And we were just playing out there, and I can see it right now. So I remember my mother just rushed us home, and how quickly she did that. And that's when I learned we were not wanted there. Mother didn't tell us that exactly. I can't exactly remember what she said, but I remember her being a little bit kind of, messed up about it a little bit. Even if I didn't fully understand it, yet all of these moments, all these memories, they shaped me. They put me on the path, guys, of hoping, still hoping, that one day people will just be people. And I never gave up on that. I still don't. Because, in junior high and in high school, I built real friendships with my white brothers and sisters. Our school, in many ways, became an exception. And you know what helped? We had a winning football team, nice band, and things like that. We learned how to coexist without that tension that they had in Boston. So then the question becomes, if we as kids could figure it out, why couldn't the adults? Why couldn't they? The truth is, many of them were taught that hate, and it was passed down. It was ingrained. But even then, not all the kids believed what their parents believed. So I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and that matters, because I had some great friends in high school. Some I still am very close to and everything. And, and that matters. And that matters. It really did matter. So that even happens today. A lot of the kids don't believe in what their parents, a lot of the kids are not following in their parents' ways of being Republicans. A lot of them are very progressive. And that just shows that kids have a whole different mindset. And a lot of the racial stuff that we feel now, the new kids, they don't get into all that. It's just us. and we're trying to keep them safe from it. And there are a few that are still being taught that. So it's still not totally gone. Yeah. And another thing that stays with me and why this is so personal to me is my father. My father became like the first black warehouse manager at his company. And white men just loved my dad. I called him a white man whisperer. They loved my dad. He was charismatic, respectful, easy to get along with. But now that he's gone, I sometimes wonder how much love did he truly feel for them, because I remember watching him change around white men, becoming more submissive, more careful. As long as we, more careful. I remember how I used to work with my dad every summer, and the owner of the company, he would come every Friday and he would personally hand out paychecks and stop at all of our stations. My dad was a printer, and I worked every summer with Dad. He'd come around and give us our check, and Dad would go, "Yes, sir, Mr. Jimmy. How you doing, Mr. Jimmy? Yeah, I think that was his name, Jimmy. I can't remember. But anyway, and Dad would just morph into this person, around white men. And it just wasn't him. So I remember watching him change, his whole demeanor change every time one would come near him. So more careful. As long as we stayed in our place, everything was fine. I think that's the kind of man that they like. But they don't want you to step out of line. Don't get too proud. Don't get too loud. And I wish I had a conversation with him about this before he went on, because my dad was a great man, a great father, and I miss him deeply. He and my mother sacrificed so much that we could have a better life. They pushed through things we may never fully understand. I don't know what they went through. We never talked about stuff like this. They didn't teach us to hate or nothing like that. We were always very respectful of people. Mother never talked about anything, but they come from Louisiana and East Texas. So they come from a different time when they didn't really, cohabitate with a lot of white people. So they weren't used to it. I remember we would drive through rich neighborhoods. My mother would love to watch rich people's homes, and we would drive through it. Mother would tell us as we drive through the neighborhood, "Shh, be quiet." We'd have to be quiet. We'd go through the neighborhood. I'm like, why? We're in the car. Mother would make us be quiet in the car because she knew something that we knew. We had to not be we couldn't put too much attention to ourselves, and Mother knew that. So when we drove through looking at the beautiful homes, Mother loved to look at beautiful homes. We had to be quiet because she knew something would happen to her children. So she would tell us, "Be quiet." And we would go, "Ooh, look at that, Mom. Yeah, isn't that beautiful?" We'd go through the neighborhood. I remember that so vividly. So this is why this topic is so personal to me. But I know my dad did this stuff to take care of his family. And this is always going to be so personal to me. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with the choice. We can ignore history, simply the conversation, and pretend the playing field has always been level, or we can acknowledge the full story, not to assign blame, but to understand reality, because understanding is what leads to better decisions, better policies, better conversations. And this isn't about dwelling in the past. It's about recognizing how the past shows up in the present. And if we're serious about moving forward, we have to be honest about what's been holding us back. Now, that video I watched didn't just tell a story. It reminded me that awareness matters, and conversations like this, they matter too. So I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What do you think needs to change? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I know that when I do this podcast like this, and I put in, we break our podcast into little clips and I post them around social media. And I get a lot of MAGA hate for some of the stuff that I have, but I really want to have, I don't want to be fighting with people. I want to have a serious conversation as to why do y'all feel like that we take advantage? Why do y'all feel like that we have gotten everything that we're supposed to get? Do y'all realize how far behind we are? Do you realize that? We're only fighting to be equal, not more, equal. So we're woke whenever we see that, that's not fair to black people. Why would you do that? Why would you gerrymander a district so we can't vote in elections? We can't ever get a candidate that we want. No. Now, why are you trying to change the voting laws so we can't vote? What are you doing? Do you understand what I'm trying to say to y'all? That's what being woke is about. We call it out. If y'all are doing stuff that still reminds us of things in the past, we will call it out. We're woke. Do you get that? Excuse me. So let's talk about it. So now, at the end of this, I'm going to show you the video that was inspiration for this episode. And the name of this creator, his name is Phil Vischer, Vischer, Phil Vischer. And you should follow him on social media. His channel is a wealth of historical information, and he presents it in a way that's easy to understand. And this video I'm going to show is about 15 minutes, but please watch all of it or listen to all of it if you're listening on the podcast. I specifically want my white brothers and sisters to watch this video. This will give you clarity to use to why certain things trigger us as the people. This will tell you why we are like we are. And he's just giving you a history lesson as to why there's racial divide in America. You know, he even has a part 2. I got to look at that too as well. But you need to find him. He's on social media. I found him on Facebook. I don't know if he's on TikTok and everything. I'm sure that he is, but I follow him. And this video is really, really good. And it will explain the whole wokeness that you guys hate us to even talk about. And it'll give you a little bit of context into what's going on. Do you know there's only 2 times when I felt like we were one as people. We had each other's back. There was true love. One was after 9/11. Baby, black and white, we were ready to get anybody that had anything, was trying to do anything to Americans. We were Americans together. We didn't want no mess. We were taking care of each other. We were trying to make sure that none of this stuff spewed into our lives. We were conscious. We helped each other out, you know. And that was a time I thought that we came together, because what happened to us that day was horrific. Yeah. And the other time was during the believe it or not, during the George Floyd thing, when everybody was coming out and finally understanding, or at least we thought they were, understanding what happened to that man. If it wasn't for that video where we actually saw George Floyd die before our eyes, while one white gentleman and his cohorts stood there and let him die. No other person is treated like that. I've never seen a white man treated like that. I had just never seen that. That should never have happened. For whatever reason why they detained him, that should never have happened. And I felt like people really felt our pain, and they started going out and they were giving us all these ads and commercials, and Target open black thing. They were helping black businesses. And then Donald Trump came along and destroyed the whole movement with this whole woke agenda. And you guys bought into it so quickly. So That's why this is an important podcast to me, because I hope it reaches people and understand. Stop throwing the word woke around like it's nothing. That's a big deal to us. We came up with the phrase and we're taking it back. You've made it into like a joke, but we're taking it back. And we're going to stay woke. We're going to stay woke until this country does what it's supposed to do for all people. And you know what's so strange? We fight for all people, even when it's not our fight. We're out here fighting for the ICE stuff. It's not even happening to us. It's happening to our Latino brothers and sisters, but they don't really care that we're doing it. But we're the ones that's making the noise. We're making noise for you. We're doing it for you. Because you know why? Because there are laws being broken. And that's not right. And that's not right. So I'm going to end this podcast with this video of Phil Vischer. I want you to listen to it. He's got great information. And thank you so much for joining this podcast. So I'm not going to close till the end because I may have some words after his video. So let's go ahead and play the video and then we will come back. All right?
We need to talk about race. Why are people protesting? Why are people angry? Slavery ended 150 years ago. The civil rights movement was 60 years ago. Racial discrimination is illegal now. Heck, we even had a black president. So why are people still upset? We're going to go through history and we're going to look at some data. And we're going to go quickly so this video doesn't get too long. So, hang on. These are two households in America. One is black, the other is white. Today, the average black household has 60% of the income of the average white household, but only 1/10 of the household wealth. Why does that matter? Well, household wealth helps send kids to school, helps launch small businesses, stabilizes loss of income, and helps families survive catastrophic events like divorce or unemployment. What's amazing about this number is that there are lots of extremely wealthy African Americans, movie stars, pop stars, 75% of the NBA, 70% of the NFL, Oprah, Tyler Perry, Ben Carson, Morgan Freeman, and there are a lot of extremely poor white families. Think of Appalachia and other parts of rural America. But even when we factor all that in, the average black household still has only 1/10 the wealth of the average white household. How did that happen? Well, here we go. What happened after we freed the slaves, after the Civil War ended? 9 states enacted vagrancy laws, making it a crime to not have a job. The law was applied only to black men. 8 of those states then allowed prisoners, the black men who'd just been arrested for not having a job, to be hired out to plantation owners with little or no pay going to the prisoners themselves. So, that's right, men who had been freed from the plantations found themselves right back on the plantations. Additional laws prohibited mischief and insulting gestures, which allowed more black men to be arrested and created a huge market for convict leasing. Working conditions for these leased convicts could be worse than slavery because the plantation owner leasing the black prisoner had no long-term interest in his well-being. By the turn of the 20th century, every state in the South had mandated racial segregation by law, Jim Crow laws, which supported a social ostracism for blacks that extended to schools, churches, housing, jobs, restrooms, hotels and restaurants, hospitals, prisons, funeral homes, morgues, and cemeteries. White politicians competed with each other to be more strict and specific on segregation. For example, a law prohibiting blacks and whites from playing chess together. No interracial chess playing. That might lead to lawn darts. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled that these Jim Crow laws were perfectly legal because they, quote, reflected customs and traditions and, quote, preserved public peace and good order. These laws stayed in place until 1954, when the idea of separate but equal was struck down in the ruling known as Brown versus Board of Education. So what happened next after Brown? Well, in 1956, the Southern Manifesto was signed by 101 out of 128 Congress members from the South, pledging to maintain Jim Crow by all means possible. 5 states passed nearly 50 new Jim Crow laws after 1954. Private whites-only schools, dubbed segregation academies, popped up all across the South, many of them Christian. But now widespread civil rights protests, combined with anti-war protests that were occasionally becoming violent, inspired the political rise of law and order rhetoric. Richard Nixon became the first candidate to campaign specifically on a platform of law and order. In 1968, 81% of Americans agreed that law and order had broken down in this country, and the majority blamed communists and Negroes who start riots. Let's go back to household wealth. The average black household has 1/10 the wealth of the average white household. Why is that? Because the number one source of intergenerational wealth in America is home ownership. And from the 1930s to well into the 1960s, the federal government enacted policies to actively encourage white families to own homes and discourage black families from doing the same. In 1934, the Federal Housing Administration created a risk rating system to determine which neighborhoods were safe investment for federally backed mortgages. Black neighborhoods were deemed too risky, marked off in maps with red ink, in a practice now known as redlining. After World War II, a boom of new suburban housing was built all over the country, much of it restricted by deed to whites only. In 1948, 40% of new housing developments in Minneapolis, for example, had covenants prohibiting purchase by African Americans. So blacks couldn't live in white neighborhoods and couldn't get federally insured loans for black neighborhoods. Until 1950, the Realtor's Code of Ethics specifically prohibited selling a house in a white neighborhood to a non-white family. You could lose your realtor's license if you helped a black family buy a home in a white neighborhood. In the 1930s, the FHA's underwriting manual said, quote, incompatible racial groups should not be permitted to live in the same communities. The FHA went on to recommend that highways would be a great way to separate black neighborhoods from white neighborhoods. The FHA funded huge white-only suburban housing developments, leaving blacks behind in inner cities. After World War II, the GI Bill provided subsidized mortgages to help millions of men returning from war to buy their first home. While technically eligible for the GI Bill, the way it was administered left 1 million black veterans largely on the outside looking in. In New York and New Jersey, the GI Bill insured more than 67,000 new mortgages. Fewer than 100 of those went for homes purchased by non-whites. In 1947, there were 3,200 mortgages in Mississippi guaranteed by the government for returning veterans. Of the 3,200, only 2 went to black veterans. As a result, white families after the war were able to build home equity, growing wealth for retirement, inheritance, and college education for their kids. One historian has stated that there was no greater instrument for widening an already huge racial gap in post-war America than the GI Bill. And then came the war on drugs. Inner-city blacks were extremely vulnerable economically. The overwhelming majority of African Americans in 1970 lacked college degrees and had grown up in fully segregated schools. In the second half of the 20th century, factories and manufacturing jobs moved to the suburbs. Black workers struggled to follow the jobs. They couldn't live in many of the new suburban developments. And as late as 1970, only 28% of black fathers had access to a car. When a white man in Cicero, Illinois, just outside Chicago, sublet an apartment to a black family, the white community rioted, setting fire to the apartment building and smashing windows until the National Guard had to intervene. The result of all of this: in 1970, 70% of African American men had good blue-collar jobs. By 1987, only 28% did. As unemployment skyrocketed in African American communities, so did drug use. As drug use increased, so did crime. A dynamic today that we see playing out in white rural communities hit hard by unemployment and opioid addiction. Throughout the 1970s, white America became increasingly concerned by images of black violence shown on TV and in magazines. Drugs were the problem. Drug dealers and drug users were the enemy. So we decided to treat the drug epidemic not as a health crisis, but as a crisis of criminality, and we militarized our response. During the Reagan-Bush years from 1981 to 1991, how we invested money in anti-drug allocation completely changed. The anti-drug budget for the Department of Defense went from $33 million in 1981 to more than $1 billion in 1991. The Drug Enforcement Agency's budget to fight criminality and drug use went from $86 million to more than $1 billion. Then we came to the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which carried mandatory minimum sentences, much harsher for the distribution of crack cocaine, which was associated with blacks, than powder cocaine, which was associated with whites. Mandated evictions from public housing for any tenant who permitted drug-related criminal activity to occur on or near premises. It eliminated many government benefits, including student loans, for anyone convicted of a drug crime. The 1988 revision set a 5-year minimum sentence for possessing any amount of crack cocaine, even if there was no intent to distribute. Previously, it had been a 1-year maximum sentence for possessing any amount of any drug without the intent to distribute. Now, it might seem like we're picking on Republicans, so now it's time to pick on some Democrats. During the Clinton presidency, the funding for public housing was cut by $17 billion. At the same time, the funding for prisons increased by $19 billion. The number of Americans imprisoned for drug crimes exploded. In 1980, there were 41,000 Americans imprisoned for drug crimes. Today, there are more than 500,000, more than the entire 1980 prison population. Most arrests are for possession. In 2005, 80% of the arrests were for possessing drugs, not selling drugs. In a bizarre twist, we also militarized our police forces. Between 1997 and 1999, the Pentagon handled 3.4 million orders for military equipment from more than 11,000 police agencies, including 253 aircraft, including Black Hawk and Huey helicopters, 7,800 M16 rifles, 181 grenade launchers for the police, 8,000 bulletproof helmets, 1,200 night vision goggles. We also changed policing tactics. A no-knock entry is when a SWAT team literally breaks down your door or smashes in through the windows, like in E.T. when the cops come flying in from every direction looking for E.T. So back to Minneapolis. In 1986, Minneapolis SWAT teams performed no-knock entries 35 times. 10 years later, in 1996, they performed no-knock entries 700 times. That's 2 every day. There were financial incentives for arresting more drug users. Federal grants to local police departments were tied to the number of drug arrests. Research suggests the huge surge in arrests from increased drug enforcement was due more to budget incentives than to actual increases in drug use. So what was the result? An explosion of our prison population. In 25 years, the U.S. prison population went from 350,000 to over 2.3 million. The United States now has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We imprison a higher percentage of our black population than South Africa ever did during apartheid. Data shows that the increased prison population was driven primarily by changes in sentencing policy. There was no visible connection between higher incarceration rates and higher violent crime rates. If you are a drug felon, you are barred from public housing. You are ineligible for food stamps. You're forced to check the box on employment applications marking yourself as a convicted felon. A criminal record has been shown to reduce the likelihood of getting a callback or job offer by as much as 50%. The negative impact of a criminal record for an African American job applicant is twice as large as for a white applicant. In 2006, 1 in 106 white men was behind bars. For black men, it was 1 in 14. For black men between the age of 20 and 35, the age where families are built, it's 1 in 9. Overall, African Americans and white Americans use drugs at roughly the same rate, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. It may be true that there isn't explicit racism in our legal system anymore, but it doesn't mean justice is blind. A study, a law in Georgia permitted prosecutors to seek life imprisonment for a second drug offense. Over the period of the study, this law was used against 1% of white second-time offenders and 16% of black second-time offenders. As a result, 98% of prisoners serving life sentences under this law were black. Study, African American youth in the U.S. make up 16% of all youth. But 28% of all juvenile arrests, 35% of youth sent to adult court instead of juvenile court, and 58% of youth admitted to adult state prison. Study, blacks on the New Jersey Turnpike make up 15% of all drivers, but 42% of all stops by police and 73% of all arrests. Among all drivers stopped, white drivers were 2 times more likely than black drivers to be carrying drugs. Study, Volusia County, Florida. 5% of drivers were black or Latino, but 80% of drivers stopped were black or Latino. Study, Oakland, California. Black drivers are twice as likely as white drivers to be stopped and 3 times more likely to be searched. In Minneapolis, Philando Castile had been pulled over 49 times in 13 years, mostly for minor infractions. The 49th time he was pulled over, he was shot by the officer while sitting inside his car. He'd been pulled over for a broken taillight. Chuck Colson's organization, Prison Fellowship, recently organized a manifesto that was signed by evangelical leaders asserting that our over-reliance on incarceration fails to make us safer or restore the people and communities who have been harmed. Unconscious bias seeps into schools, too, as white teachers often assume black students are less intelligent than they actually are. A gifted student usually has to be recommended by a teacher to move to a gifted track. When a teacher is black, an equally gifted white and black student have comparable chances of being recommended. When the teacher is white, the black student's odds of being recommended are cut in half. Are white teachers racist? No. Are they affected by bias? Yes. And it affects black students every day. So where are we? The average black household has 1/10 the wealth of the average white household. This didn't happen by accident. It happened by policy. We, the majority culture, told them where they could live and where they couldn't. Then we moved most of the jobs to the places we told them they couldn't live. When the predictable explosion of unemployment and poverty resulted in a predictable increase in drug use and crime, we criminalized the problem. We built $19 billion of new jails and sold grenade launchers to the police. As a result, a white boy born in America today has a 1 in 23 chance of going to prison in his lifetime. For a black boy, it's 1 in 4. And that is why people are angry. Many people care deeply about these issues. Many have suggested solutions. Some of those have been tested, with results ranging from moderate success to abject failure. I'm not here to tell you what the right solutions are, because I don't know. I'm just here to ask you to do one thing. It is the thing that begins every journey to a solution for every problem. What am I asking you to do? Care.
There you go. I had to come back and say, thank Phil Vischer. If he happens to see this, I'm going to tag him in this podcast for that great study that he just did there on what goes on why people are upset and why we're mad. But let me just end this text by saying, guys, there's a lot of us and we have good lives. We're living good. We're living wonderful lives, and we're not complaining about things heretofore, and we're making things happen for ourselves. But there are a lot of us who still are trying so hard, and things are still coming into their way. I mean, we have to be 1,000 times better at anything just to get in, and we want the playing field equal. That's all, just equal. So I'm looking into my camera to my white brothers and sisters. You can do everything by helping us stomp out when you see something that's not right. Be woke. You can use the word. I don't care. You can call it what you want. Be woke. Help us stomp this out. And one day, maybe these situations will never come up again because we would have figured it out. Like he said, all we want you to do is just care. Just care. That's it. So thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. You can catch me on any place you listen to your podcast. And if you're not a follower, go ahead and hit that follow button on this podcast. You can see me on YouTube as well. If you want to see the video version, check me out on YouTube as well. And that is at Let's Talk with Carl E. Long. You'll find it on YouTube. So have a wonderful day. And until next time, bye.